Victor Ashford stood frozen in the doorway of his own master bedroom, his heart pounding against his ribs. The pregnant cleaner, Maria, was crouched beside his nightstand, her trembling hands clutching something small and silver, something she was desperately trying to hide beneath the folds of her uniform. She hadn't heard him come in, but what he didn't know yet was that the object in her hand would unravel everything he thought he knew about his perfect life. And what she didn't know was that he'd been watching her through the security cameras for the past 3 weeks, trying to understand why his wife had suddenly insisted they hire her. "Maria," he said quietly. She gasped, spinning around. Her 7-month belly knocked against the nightstand. The silver object clattered to the marble floor. It was a locket, his mother's locket, the one that had been missing for 23 years. 3 months earlier, Victor Ashford had everything a man could want. At 45, he'd built Ashford Industries from the ground up, a tech empire worth $400 million. His penthouse overlooked Central Park. His wife, Celeste, was a former model who threw charity galas that made the society pages. His life was a carefully constructed masterpiece of success. But masterpieces can hide cracks. Victor had started noticing things. Small things. Celeste on late-night phone calls she'd end abruptly when he entered the room. Bank statements with cash withdrawals she couldn't quite explain. And then, 6 weeks ago, she'd come home with an unusual request. "We need to hire a new cleaner," Celeste had announced over breakfast, not meeting his eyes. "I've already found someone. She starts Monday. Her name is Maria Santos. What happened to the cleaning service we've used for 5 years? They're not thorough enough." Celeste's fingers had tightened around her coffee cup. "Maria comes highly recommended. And Victor, she's pregnant. Single mother. I thought it would be a charitable thing. Since when did Celeste care about charity that didn't come with a photo opportunity?" But Victor had been distracted by a merger, and he'd agreed. He remembered thinking his wife might be trying to soften her image, maybe wanting to appear more compassionate before the gala season started. He had no idea he was letting a ghost into his home. Maria Santos had walked through their door on a Monday morning in March, 7 months pregnant, and carrying nothing but a small backpack. She was 28 years old, with dark eyes that seemed to hold decades of sorrow. Her hands shook when Celeste showed her around the penthouse. "You'll clean Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays," Celeste had instructed, her voice crisp. "The master bedroom. The study. The living areas. You are not to enter Mr. Ashford's private office or the locked storage room on the 3rd floor. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Maria had whispered. Victor had only seen her briefly that first day, a quiet shadow moving through his home, barely making a sound. But he'd noticed how she paused in front of the family photos in the hallway, how her hand had drifted unconsciously to her belly as she stared at the portrait of Victor with his parents, taken 30 years ago. Something about her felt familiar in a way he couldn't name, and Celeste had watched Maria like a hawk. By the 2nd week, Victor's instincts were screaming. He'd built an empire by reading people, by sensing when something was off. And everything about this situation was off. He started coming home at random times, always with an excuse. Forgot a file. Conference call from home. Headache. Each time he'd find Maria cleaning, her movements efficient but nervous. Each time, Celeste would appear within minutes, as if she'd been alerted. Then, Victor did something he wasn't proud of. He checked the security footage. The penthouse had cameras in common areas. The living room, kitchen, hallways. Not the bedrooms or bathrooms, but enough to see movement patterns. And what he saw made his blood run cold. Every time Maria was alone, she would stop cleaning and stand in front of that hallway portrait. Sometimes for minutes. Tears streaming down her face. Her lips moving as if she was speaking to someone who wasn't there. And twice, when Celeste thought Victor was at work, He'd watched his wife corner Maria in the kitchen, speaking in harsh whispers too quiet for the cameras to pick up. Maria would nod, her face pale, her hands protectively cradling her belly. What hold did Celeste have over this woman? The day everything changed started like any other. Victor had a morning meeting in Midtown, then lunch with investors. He was supposed to be gone until 5. But the lunch had ended early, and something, call it intuition, told him to go home. He entered quietly, using the side entrance. The penthouse was silent except for the soft sound of movement from upstairs, not Celeste's sharp heels, softer, slower. Maria. Victor climbed the stairs without announcing himself. Later he'd wonder what made him do it, what made him move like a thief in his own home, drawn toward the master bedroom where he had no reason to think anything was wrong. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, he saw her. Maria, heavily pregnant, crouched beside his nightstand with a small key in her hand. His mother's antique jewelry box sat open on the bed, and Maria was holding the silver locket, the one his mother had worn every day until she died, the one that had disappeared from the hospital the day of the funeral. 23 years ago. Maria had been 5 years old. The math didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. "Maria," he said. The locket fell. The sound of silver hitting marble seemed to echo through the entire universe. Maria's face drained of color. For a moment, Victor thought she might faint. Her hand shot to her belly, protective, instinctive. "Mr. Ashford." Her voice cracked. "I can explain." "Can you?" Victor stepped into the room, his mind racing. "Can you explain why you're in my bedroom, going through my dead mother's belongings, holding a locket that's been missing for over 2 decades? Maria struggled to her feet, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. Her eyes darted to the door, calculating escape routes. "Please," she whispered. "You don't understand. Then make me understand." Victor's voice was cold, controlled. This was his boardroom voice, the one that made executives sweat. "Before I call the police." "No." The word burst from Maria with such force that Victor actually stepped back. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Please, not the police, please," she said. "She?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "Celeste?" Maria's expression confirmed everything. "Start talking," Victor said quietly. "Now, why did my wife hire you? What does she have on you? And how the hell do you have my mother's locket?" Maria sank onto the edge of the bed, her whole body trembling. She looked at the locket on the floor, then at Victor, then at her belly. A decision was being made behind those dark eyes. "My name is Maria Elena Santos," she said slowly. "But 23 years ago, my last name was Rodriguez. And your mother, Victor Emmanuel Ashford, your mother saved my life." The world tilted. "What are you talking about?" "St. Catherine's Hospital, December 14th, 23 years ago. Your mother was dying of cancer. I was 5 years old, in the children's ward with pneumonia. My mother, my birth mother, she'd abandoned me there. I was alone. The nurses didn't think I'd make it through the night." Victor's mouth went dry. "December 14th, the day his mother died. Your mother heard me crying," Maria continued, her voice breaking. She was so weak she could barely move, but she had a nurse wheel her to my room. She sat with me all night, held my hand, sang to me. And when the doctors said I needed an emergency blood transfusion and my mother was untraceable, she what? Victor's heart was hammering. She gave me her blood. Even though she was dying, even though the doctors said it would weaken her, maybe kill her faster, she did it anyway. Maria looked up at him, tears streaming. She saved my life, and before they took her back to her room, she put this locket around my neck. She said, "Every child deserves to know they're loved. If no one else tells you, This will remind you." Victor's knees felt weak. He'd never known this story. His mother had died that night, and in the chaos of grief, the locket had simply been gone. They'd assumed it had been lost in the hospital, maybe stolen. But it had been a gift, a final act of love to a dying child. "Why didn't you ever reach out?" Victor asked, his voice rough. "Why show up now like this?" Maria's face crumpled. "Because I didn't know. I was 5. I was put into foster care, moved around. The locket was the only thing I had from my past, but I didn't remember your mother's name. I didn't remember anything except her face and her voice. And then 3 months ago, I saw your wife at a clinic." "A clinic?" "The Riverside Women's Health Center. I worked there as a receptionist. Your wife came in for an appointment, and when I processed her paperwork, I saw the name. Celeste Ashford, married to Victor Ashford, and there was a family photo on her file, for insurance purposes. And I recognized you." Victor's mind was reeling. "Recognized me? You have your mother's eyes," Maria said simply. "And in the photo you were standing in front of this portrait." She gestured to the hallway, the same one that was in the hospital room that night. "Your mother had a copy there. I remember staring at it while she sang to me." Both of them jumped. Victor's phone was buzzing in his pocket. Celeste's name flashed on the screen. He didn't answer. "What happened after you recognized me?" Victor asked urgently. Maria's expression darkened. "I made a mistake. I was so excited, so emotional. I approached your wife after her appointment. I told her who I was, about the locket, about what your mother did for me. I thought she'd be happy to know that you'd want to know. But she wasn't happy. She was furious." Maria's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "She pulled me aside, into an empty room. She told me that if I ever contacted you, if I ever told you this story, she would destroy me. She said she knew I was pregnant, single, barely making ends meet. She said she'd make sure I lost my job, my apartment, any chance of keeping my baby." Victor felt rage building in his chest. "Why would she—" "And then she offered me a deal," Maria continued. "She said she'd hire me to clean your penthouse. Good money, enough to prepare for the baby, but only if I kept my mouth shut about your mother, only if I never spoke to you directly, only if I did exactly what she said. Jesus Christ. I was desperate, Mr. Ashford. I have no family, no support. This baby," Maria's hand pressed against her belly, "this baby is everything to me. I couldn't risk losing everything. So I said yes. I took the job." I stayed quiet. Victor's phone buzzed again. "Celeste." He silenced it. "But you came to find the locket," he said. "You broke the deal." Maria nodded, fresh tears falling. "Because 2 weeks ago, I found out something about your wife, something she's hiding, and I realized she's never going to let me go. Even after I have the baby, even if I quit, she'll always have this over me. So I decided I needed proof of my story. I needed the locket. I thought if I could just take a photo of it here, in your home, it would prove I was telling the truth about your mother. That I wasn't some crazy person making things up." "Proof for what? Why would you need—" "Because I was going to tell you everything. Today, I left you a letter. It's in your office, in the Shakespeare collection. I know you read there every evening. Behind Hamlet." Victor's heart stopped. He did read there, every evening. How could she possibly know that? "What did Celeste do?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "What are you afraid of?" Maria opened her mouth to answer. Footsteps. Sharp heels on marble. Celeste was home. Maria's face went white. "She can't know I told you. Please, she'll—" "Hide in the bathroom," Victor hissed. "Now." Maria moved as quickly as her pregnant body would allow, closing the bathroom door just as Celeste's footsteps reached the second floor. Victor bent down, grabbed the locket, and shoved it into his pocket. He arranged his face into a neutral expression just as his wife appeared in the bedroom doorway. Celeste was 42, still stunning in the way that required a team of professionals to maintain. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her cream suit was perfect. But her eyes were calculating, cold. "Victor," she said, surprise flashing across her features. "You're home early." Meeting ended. "Thought I'd catch up on some reading." Celeste's gaze swept the room, landing on the open jewelry box. Something flickered in her expression, too fast to read. "Looking for something?" she asked lightly. "My mother's ring. Thought I might have it resized." Sentimental mood. The lie came easily. Years of business negotiations had taught him how to bluff. Celeste walked to the dresser, setting down her purse. "Is Maria here?" "Haven't seen her." "Why?" "Her car's outside. I thought I heard movement upstairs." Victor shrugged. "Must be cleaning the 3rd floor." They stared at each other. A silent battle of wills. Finally, Celeste smiled. A cold, brittle thing. "Well, I have calls to make. Don't forget, we have the Hartley dinner tonight. 7:30. She left. Victor waited, counting heartbeats. When he was certain she was gone, he opened the bathroom door. Maria stood there, clutching the sink, her face grey. "Go," Victor whispered. "Finish cleaning or do whatever you normally do. Act natural. I'll check my office for your letter. Mr. Ashford, we're not done talking. But not here. I'll text you a location. A cafe. Tomorrow morning. Can you make it?" Maria nodded. "Then go, now, before she comes back." Maria slipped out of the bathroom, grabbed her cleaning supplies, and moved into the hallway. Victor listened to her footsteps fade. Then he pulled the locket from his pocket and really looked at it for the first time in 23 years. It was tarnished but intact, and when he opened it, his breath caught. Inside were 2 photos. One was of his mother and father, young and happy. The other was new, added recently. It was a photo of a little boy, maybe 3 years old. Dark hair, dark eyes. He looked exactly like Victor had at that age. Victor's mind went blank. Then it roared back to life, 1,000 questions colliding at once. He forced himself to walk calmly down the stairs, past the living room where Celeste was on a phone call, her voice low and urgent. He went to his study, closed the door, and went straight to the bookshelf. Hamlet. 2nd shelf, 3rd from the left. He pulled it out. A folded envelope fell to the floor. His hands shook as he opened it. The letter inside was written in neat, careful handwriting. "Dear Mr. Ashford, by the time you read this, you will have found me with your mother's locket. I'm sorry for the deception. I'm sorry for entering your life this way. But I need you to know the truth, and your wife has made sure I can't tell you face to face. Your mother saved my life 23 years ago. That much I told you is true. But there's more. 4 years ago I had a son. His name is Daniel. He's 3.5 years old now, and he's the light of my world. His father abandoned us before he was born. I raised Daniel alone, working 2 jobs, barely surviving. But I was happy. We were happy. 6 months ago, Daniel got sick. Leukemia. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He needs treatment, chemotherapy, possibly a bone marrow transplant, and I can't afford it. Even with Medicaid, the costs are crushing me. When I met your wife at the clinic and told her about your mother, she seemed sympathetic at first. She asked about my life. I told her everything, about Daniel, about his illness, about my struggle, and that's when everything changed. She offered me money, a lot of money, enough to cover Daniel's entire treatment. But there was a condition. I had to disappear. She said she would pay for everything, treatment, housing, a new life, but only if I took Daniel and moved away, far away, and I could never contact you, never tell you about your mother's final act of kindness, never come back. I asked why. She wouldn't say. She just said that my connection to your past was inconvenient, and that if I really loved my son, I'd take the deal and go. I almost did. God forgive me, I almost took the money and ran. But then I realized, what kind of person would I be if I let someone buy my silence? If I let your mother's memory be erased because it was inconvenient? And more than that, I started asking questions. Why would your wife pay so much to hide such a simple story? What was she really afraid of? So I did some digging. And Mr. Ashford, I found something. Something about your wife that she doesn't want you to know. There's a safety deposit box at Manhattan First Bank. Box 2847. Your wife visits it every month. I followed her there twice. I don't know what's inside, but I know she goes there right after meeting with a man named Thomas Carrington. I think your wife is having an affair, but I think it's more than that. I think there's money involved. Money being moved, and I think she's trying to clear away anyone who might complicate her plans, including me, and maybe including you. I'm leaving this letter because I'm scared. If something happens to me, if I disappear, please look into this. Please protect your mother's legacy. And please, if you can, help my son. He's at Riverside Children's Hospital, Pediatric Oncology, under the name Daniel Santos. I'm sorry for bringing this darkness into your life, but your mother taught me that every child deserves to be loved and protected. I'm fighting for my son the way she fought for me. Thank you for listening. Maria Elena Santos. P.S. The little boy in the locket, that's Daniel. I added the photo so your mother could watch over him, the way she once watched over me. Victor read the letter 3 times, each word burning into his brain. Celeste was having an affair with Thomas Carrington. Victor knew that name. Thomas Carrington was the CFO of Ashford Industries, a man Victor trusted. A man who had access to company finances, money being moved, a safety deposit box. Plans that required clearing away anyone inconvenient. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and Victor didn't like what he was seeing. Victor! Celeste's voice, calling from the hallway. Are you in there? We need to start getting ready. Victor quickly folded the letter and tucked it into his breast pocket, right next to the locket. Just finishing some emails, he called back. I'll be up in 10 minutes. He heard her footsteps retreat. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call he never thought he'd have to make. Keller Investigations. A gruff voice answered. It's Victor Ashford. I need you to run a full background check. Financials, movements, associates, everything. Who's the target? Victor closed his eyes. My wife. That night, at the Hartley dinner, Victor played the perfect husband. He smiled. He made conversation. He laughed at jokes. And, all the while, he watched his wife. Celeste was radiant, charming, the perfect society wife. She touched his arm at appropriate moments. She told the story about their anniversary trip to Paris. She was flawless. But Victor saw things he'd never noticed before. How her eyes constantly scanned the room, calculating. How she checked her phone every 10 minutes. Her jaw tightening when she saw certain messages. How when Thomas Carrington arrived, because of course he'd been invited, her entire posture changed. Became electric. Aware. They barely spoke to each other. They were careful. Professional. Too professional. Victor excused himself to the bathroom and instead slipped into the Hartley's library. He called the investigator back. I need surveillance on 2 people, he said quietly. My wife, Celeste Ashford, and Thomas Carrington, CFO of Ashford Industries. I need to know everywhere they go, everyone they meet, and every transaction they make. And I need it. Yesterday. This is going to get expensive. I don't care. And one more thing. I need information on a safety deposit box at Manhattan First Bank. Box 2847. I need to know what's in it. That's illegal without a warrant. Then get creative. I need to know." The next morning, Victor told Celeste he had an early meeting. Instead, he went to Riverside Children's Hospital. The pediatric oncology wing was painted in cheerful colors that somehow made everything sadder. Victor stopped at the nurse's station. "I'm looking for Daniel Santos," he said. The nurse, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, checked her computer. "Are you family?" "A friend of his mother's." The nurse hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Room 314. But you should know. Daniel's not doing well. We've been trying to reach Maria all morning, but she's not answering her phone." Victor's blood went cold. "What do you mean she's not answering?" "She always answers. Always. She sleeps here most nights. But she left yesterday afternoon and hasn't come back. We're worried." Victor forced himself to stay calm. "Can I see Daniel?" The nurse led him down the hall. Through the window of room 314, Victor saw a little boy lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to IV lines. He was thin, pale, his head covered in a Spider-Man baseball cap. But his eyes were bright, alive. And he looked exactly like the photo in the locket. Exactly like Victor had at that age. Exactly like... "Oh my God," Victor whispered. The nurse looked at him. "Sir, are you all right?" Victor couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because the truth had just hit him with the force of a freight train. The boy looked like him because the boy was his, not by blood, by something deeper, by his mother's blood, the transfusion. His mother had given Maria her blood, and in that moment, in that act of desperate love, she'd created a connection, a genetic echo. But no, that wasn't possible. Blood transfusions didn't work that way. Unless... "Nurse," Victor said hoarsely, Maria's blood type. "What is it? I can't give out that information. Please. It's important. Life and death important." The nurse studied him, then sighed. "AB negative. Same as Daniel. It's rare. That's part of why finding a bone marrow match has been so difficult. AB negative. His mother's blood type. His blood type." Victor's mind was racing. AB negative was rare, less than 1% of the population. The chances of Maria naturally having it were tiny. But if she'd received a massive transfusion from his mother as a child, enough to save her life, enough to essentially rebuild her blood supply, it was medically unprecedented. But not impossible. His mother's final gift hadn't just saved Maria's life, it had literally become part of her. And when Maria had become pregnant, that genetic miracle had passed on. Daniel wasn't Victor's son by any normal definition, but he was Victor's mother's genetic grandchild. Her final legacy. "I need to see him," Victor said. The little boy looked up as Victor entered. Despite the IV lines and the pallor, his smile was immediate and warm. "Hi," Daniel said. "Are you a doctor?" "Nobody. I'm a friend of your mum's." "Where's Mama?" The smile faltered. "She's supposed to be here. She promised." Victor's throat tightened. "I'm going to find her. That's a promise." "She always keeps her promises," Daniel said seriously. "She says promises are like shields. They protect people." Victor had to look away. When he'd gathered himself, he asked, "Daniel, has anyone else come to visit you? Anyone your mum didn't know?" Daniel thought about it. There was a pretty lady. Blonde hair. She came yesterday, before Mama left. She talked to Mama in the hallway. I couldn't hear, but Mama looked scared after. And then Mama said she had to go do something important and she'd be back soon. What time was this? After lunch. Maybe 2 o'clock? The same time Victor had found Maria in his bedroom. She'd come there straight from the hospital, straight from some kind of confrontation with Celeste. "Daniel, did you hear anything they said? Anything at all?" The boy bit his lip. The lady said something about last chance. and Mama said, "I won't lie anymore." And then the lady got really mad. Victor thanked Daniel, promised again to find Maria, and practically ran from the hospital. He tried Maria's phone, straight to voicemail. He tried her apartment. The address was in the file Celeste had kept. No answer. He called the investigator. "I need you to find Maria Santos. Now." Last seen yesterday around 2 p.m., leaving Riverside Children's Hospital. "I'm already on it," the investigator said. "I found something else you need to know. Your wife withdrew $300,000 in cash from a personal account yesterday morning. And Thomas Carrington booked 2 one-way tickets to the Cayman Islands. Leaving tonight. 2 tickets? For him and Celeste Ashford." Victor's world crystallized into perfect, cold clarity. His wife was planning to run, to disappear with $300,000 of what he suspected was embezzled money, probably just the tip of the iceberg. And Maria, the inconvenient witness who knew too much, who'd refused to be bought, who'd threatened to expose everything. Where was Maria? Victor drove like a madman back to the penthouse. He burst through the door, not bothering with pretense anymore. Celeste was in the living room, a suitcase open on the couch. She looked up, startled. "Victor, I thought you had meetings all day. Where is she?" Victor's voice was deadly quiet. "Where is who?" "Maria. What did you do to her?" Celeste's face went very still. Then she carefully closed the suitcase. "I don't know what you're talking about. You confronted her yesterday at the hospital. You made threats. She hasn't been seen since, so I'll ask you one more time. Where is Maria Santos?" "Even if I knew," Celeste said coldly, "why would you care? She's a cleaner, Victor. A nobody. She's the woman my mother saved. She's the woman you've been blackmailing and threatening for months. And she's the mother of a dying child. A child who carries my mother's genetic legacy because of a transfusion that should have been medically impossible but somehow worked." Celeste's eyes widened. Just for a second. It was enough. "You know," Victor breathed. "You know about Daniel, about the blood connection. That's why you wanted her gone. Not because of some affair or embezzlement, though we're going to talk about Thomas Carrington and that Cayman Islands trip. You wanted her gone because she was a living reminder of my mother. Because if I ever found out what my mother did, I'd want to help. I'd care. And that would complicate your plans." Celeste's beautiful face twisted into something ugly. "Your mother was a fool. A sentimental fool who died giving blood to some random street kid when she should have saved her strength. When she should have fought to stay alive for her own son." Victor felt something break inside him. "Get out of my house. It's half mine by law. Not if I can prove you've been embezzling from my company. Not if I can prove fraud, conspiracy, theft. And I have investigators working on that right now." Victor stepped closer. "Where is Maria?" Celeste's jaw worked. Then she laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. "You think I hurt her? I didn't touch her. I just gave her a choice. She could take the money and disappear, or she could stay and watch her son die while CPs investigated her for neglect. Anonymous tips are so easy to file. You threatened to take her son. I promised to save her son. $300,000, Victor. Enough for all his treatments. A new life. Everything she needed. All she had to do was leave. Get out of New York. Never contact you." She was going to say yes. I saw it in her eyes. She was going to take the money and go. But she didn't. "No," Celeste hissed. "The stupid bitch developed a conscience. Said she had to tell you the truth first. Said your mother deserved to be remembered. So I told her fine. Tell him, but know that while you're confessing, your son is dying alone in a hospital, and by the time you're done playing hero, every agency in the state will be investigating whether you're fit to keep him." Victor's phone rang. "The investigator. He answered without taking his eyes off Celeste. "Tell me." "Found her. Maria Santos checked herself into a women's shelter in Brooklyn last night. She's scared, hiding, but she's safe." The relief almost dropped Victor to his knees. "And the safety deposit box?" "Working on it. But I found the embezzlement. Thomas Carrington has been skimming for 2 years. Small amounts, carefully hidden. About 6 million total, moved through shell companies. And every transaction was authorized by someone with access to your wife's computer. Can you prove Celeste knew?" "Working on it. But the Cayman Islands tickets are pretty damning." Victor hung up. He looked at his wife, this woman he'd shared a life with, a bed with, 12 years with. "It's over," he said quietly. "I'm filing for divorce. I'm pressing charges. And you're going to sign an agreement right now to release any claim to Daniel Santos's medical care, because I'm paying for it. Every penny." Celeste's face went pale. "You can't." "I can. I will." Victor pulled out his phone again. "And if you or Thomas or anyone else goes near Maria or Daniel, I will use every resource I have to destroy you." "Are we clear?" Celeste stared at him. For a moment, she looked almost sad. Then the mask snapped back into place. "I loved you," she said, "in the beginning. Did you know that?" "No, you didn't," Victor said wearily. "You loved what I could give you. There's a difference." She grabbed her suitcase and walked to the door. Paused. "That little boy is going to die, Victor. You can't save everyone. Your mother couldn't. You can't. Maybe not. But I'm going to try." The door closed behind her. Victor stood alone in his perfect penthouse, surrounded by the wreckage of his perfect life. Then he grabbed his keys and headed to Brooklyn. The shelter was a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood. Maria was in a common room, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her pregnant belly prominent beneath a borrowed sweater. When she saw Victor, she stood up so fast the tea spilled. "Mr. Ashford." "Victor, please." They sat. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I went to see Daniel," Victor said finally. "He's a brave kid." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "He's everything. I know about the blackmail, about Celeste's threats, about all of it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring trouble into your life." "You didn't bring trouble. You brought truth." Victor pulled the locket from his pocket and held it out. "This belongs to you. My mother gave it to you. It's yours." Maria took it with shaking hands. "But the photo of Daniel, keep it. My mother would have wanted to protect him. She'd have moved heaven and earth to save him, just like she did for you." Victor took a breath. "And so will I." Maria looked up sharply. "What?" "I'm paying for Daniel's treatment, all of it, everything he needs. And if he needs a bone marrow transplant, I want to be tested as a donor. AB negative. Same type. It's worth a shot." No, I can't let you. It's not charity, Maria. It's family." The word hung in the air between them. "I'm not asking you to call me uncle or to pretend some connection that isn't there," Victor continued. "But my mother gave you her blood, literally made it part of you. And somehow, impossibly, that gift passed to Daniel. He's a miracle, a living testament to her love. How can I not fight for him?" Maria was crying openly now. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Say you'll trust me the way you trusted my mother 23 years ago." "Yes," Maria whispered. "Yes, thank you." The next 6 weeks were a blur. Celeste and Thomas Carrington were arrested trying to board a plane to Grand Cayman. The investigation uncovered not $6 but $8 million in embezzled funds. Celeste was charged with conspiracy, fraud, and extortion. The divorce was swift and brutal. Victor was tested as a bone marrow donor for Daniel. The odds were long, even with matching blood types. Tissue compatibility was complex. But sometimes miracles happened. The call came on a Wednesday morning. "It's a match," the doctor said. "Not perfect, but close enough. We can proceed." Victor donated bone marrow on a Friday. It was painful, exhausting, and the most meaningful thing he'd ever done. Daniel received the transplant the following Monday. And then, they waited. Maria was by Daniel's side every moment. Victor visited daily, sometimes just sitting in the hallway, not intruding but making sure they weren't alone. He watched Maria read to her son, watched her sing to him the same way Victor's mother had once sung to her, watched her fight with every atom of her being to keep her child alive. And somewhere in those sterile hospital corridors, Victor found something he'd lost years ago. Purpose. Real purpose. Not money or power or social standing, but connection. Love. The bone-deep knowledge that some things mattered more than empires. 3 weeks post-transplant, Daniel's numbers started to improve. 4 weeks, he was smiling again. 5 weeks, he asked for a cheeseburger. 6 weeks after the transplant, the doctors said the word Victor had been praying for. Remission. Maria collapsed into Victor's arms in the hallway, sobbing. He held her. This woman who was connected to him by the most unlikely, most beautiful thread imaginable. His mother's final act of love. "She saved him," Maria whispered. "Your mother saved him." "No," Victor said gently. "You saved him. You fought when it would have been easier to run. You chose truth over money. You chose love. Your mother taught me how. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people bound by loss and hope, and the kind of family that isn't made by blood, or rather, is made by blood in the most extraordinary way possible." Daniel came home to Maria's new apartment, paid for by a trust Victor had set up on a bright October morning. Maria's baby, a girl she named Grace Elena, was born 2 weeks later. Healthy. Perfect. Victor was there for the birth, pacing in the waiting room like a nervous uncle. When Maria invited him to meet Grace, he looked down at the tiny person with dark eyes and felt his mother's presence so strongly it took his breath away. "She has your mother's eyes," Maria said softly. "How do you know? You were 5. "I remember them. I'll always remember them. They were kind." Victor held Grace carefully, this second miracle child, and felt something shift in his universe. "I want to set up a foundation," he said, "in my mother's name. For children who need medical care and can't afford it. For single mothers fighting impossible odds. I want her legacy to live on." Maria smiled through her tears. She'd love that. "Will you help me run it? You know what these families need better than anyone." "Yes. Yes. Absolutely." 6 months later, the Ashford Legacy Foundation opened its doors. Maria was Director of Family Services. The foundation paid for treatments, housing, support services, everything Victor's mother would have wanted. Daniel, now 4.5, was the foundation's unofficial mascot. He'd visit the offices, bring cookies to the staff, and tell everyone about Grandma Ashford, a woman he'd never met but knew through stories, and the silver locket his mother wore every day. Victor never remarried. Occasionally, someone would ask if he and Maria were together. The answer was always no. Their bond was something different, deeper in some ways. Not romance, but a chosen family, forged by tragedy and sealed by a miracle. On the anniversary of his mother's death, Victor and Maria and the children would visit her grave. They'd bring flowers and tell her about the lives she'd saved. Not just Maria and Daniel, but the hundreds of children the foundation had helped. One evening, as Victor was leaving the foundation offices, Maria stopped him. "Can I show you something?" She led him to a new addition to the lobby, a portrait, beautifully painted. It showed his mother, young and smiling, holding the locket. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, Eleanor Ashford. Every child deserves to know they're loved. Daniel asked why there wasn't a picture of Grandma Ashford where everyone could see her, Maria explained. So I commissioned this. Is it okay? Victor couldn't speak. He just nodded, his vision blurring. They stood together, looking at the portrait. His mother gazed back at them, forever young, forever kind. She'd be proud of you, Maria said quietly. She'd be proud of all of us, Victor replied. For remembering. For carrying it forward. Outside, the city hummed with life, millions of people, each with their own struggles, their own dreams, and somewhere among them, children who would be saved by a foundation named for a woman who believed that love was the only currency that mattered. A woman who, in her final hours, had given everything to a dying child, and in doing so, had saved not one life, but hundreds, maybe thousands. The ripples spreading outward, endless, eternal. Victor locked the foundation doors and walked into the November evening. His phone buzzed. A text from Daniel, a selfie of him and baby Grace, both grinning. Victor smiled and sent back a heart. He thought about the locket, safely in Maria's possession, about the blood that had saved a life and created an impossible legacy, about the boy who was his mother's genetic grandchild and his chosen nephew, about the woman who'd refused to be silenced even when silence would have been easier, about the fact that family wasn't always what you were born into. Sometimes it was what you chose, what you fought for, what you built from ashes and hope and love that refused to die. His mother had taught him that. Maria had reminded him, and he would spend the rest of his life honoring it. The city lights sparkled like stars. Victor walked home, alone but not lonely, carrying his mother's love forward into a future she'd never see, but had helped create. One act of kindness at a time, one child at a time, one miracle at a time. The millionaire came home early and saw the pregnant cleaner hide a shocking secret. But the secret wasn't what he thought. It was something far more precious. It was love that transcended death. It was a legacy written in blood and bone and unbreakable will. It was proof that sometimes the richest people in the world aren't measured by their bank accounts, but by the lives they touch and the love they leave behind. And in the end, that was the only wealth that mattered.